Hi, welcome to my journey. Yes, today we did do the so-called interview. It wasn't really quite an interview. It just seemed like it was uh, a duplicate of the first intake questions that I had, like, my age, where I work, what is my condition, how long I've been married, you know, basically, to see if, you have, to see if you even qualify for the benefits, right? And I'm like, it seems like they do that, kind of like at the beginning, when you're, when they're taking your application, right? Telling you whether or not that, it was like a questionnaire interview, right? And then she says, well, so what is your medical condition? I said, what? Are you asking me what's ailing me? What is your medical conditions? I said, I have a lot of ailments. My ailments have began since, I started getting older. And like I said, it was very disappointing. Hold on. So, I told her how, I lost my job and my medical coverage, after working with Amazon for 4 years, right? And then I told her, I said, as I was breaking down, I went back to part-time working at Amazon until I got sick and then completely just lost my job. So she wasn't really trying to be sympathetic. Like I said, I think I would have preferred, to have dealt with, something automated. Like, if you're going to be emotionalist, well, she wasn't emotionalist. She had some emotions. The emotions that she had just didn't show compassion or sympathy. Or, not really. She did have some empathy. Now, she knew when I started getting emotional, right? Because when you start talking about people's, mental and health situations, when you're talking about it to a complete stranger, I happen to get emotional. Right? Sometimes these emotions can be sad. Sometimes these emotions can be mad. Okay? Because you don't really want to have to talk about it to a stranger, especially when, this stranger, makes it seem like they don't give a damn. All right? That's why I said it probably would have been better just to talk to AI and have AI do the interview. Because at least with AI, if AI is emotionalist, okay, you're a machine. But when we detect human beings purposely, trying to be insensitive or, bypass, your emotional wounds, instead of just acknowledging them, like, okay, ma'am, take your time. I know this could be difficult, or, she got my birth date, right? My birth date, definitely stated that I'm a senior. She also knew that I had taken the early retirement. She knew this, right? But she asked it again. Everything was like a duplication. I got upset and I said, you have all of this information. You even have access to every medication that I have been prescribed. Yes, I give consent that you guys look up my medical, right? And I said, however, I want to know, what do you guys do to qualify somebody for disability if they don't have a doctor and if they don't have medical? And that's when she finally told me. She said, well, what we do is we set them up with a doctor's appointment. And I'm like, there, yes, that's what I need. I need a doctor's appointment. And she was like, okay, well, this concludes our interview. Thank you. Because by that time, I was hostile. I was hostile because I'm like, you're asking me a lot of questions, right? And these questions, I don't know. But I do know that, I have to have consistent, constant medical supervision. I can't work. And my conditions is worsening and I don't know what I can do. So, yeah, it ended up being to where she just had to let me go until she didn't say, well, we'll contact you, when, we're going to arrange for you to have an appointment, because here's the thing, right? Now, they just announced that your medical is not going to be reported on your payment history anymore, right? They're going to separate your medical history completely. I mean, they already have the data separate, as far as your illnesses, and, your medical history, right? They have that, right? Your vaccinations, you name it, okay? But, the financial situation, they had put on your medical history, right? So, one of the things that I was like shocked and appalled at, I'm like, are you kidding me? You guys are going to allow the medical industry, to have a whole financial database available to them that we can't even see, right? The same people who will charge you just to keep you coming back and only trying to deal with your symptoms and not cure you, right? The same people who at the end of the day, can put all of these medical expense charges against your estate without you even knowing, because when you go in for an operation, they don't tell you. They don't tell you, this is how much, this is going to cost. They're not telling you if this and that is covered, just like, the recommended, colonoscopy, right? Once you get like in your 50s, they recommend that you have a colonoscopy. Oh yes, the colonoscopy is covered under your insurance, right? But the anesthesiologist is not covered under your insurance, right? So I'm like, okay, well, how much is an anesthesiologist? Right? And back then, the anesthesiologist was $1,200. And I was like griping and stuff, and then I had to catch myself, I'm sitting up here griping and bitching and moaning about somebody that could literally just take me out. Take me out, and it could be a total accident. Or not. Right? And so these are some of the things that, they don't tell you, right? Then you have situations that, where you can have, office surgery, or you might have to, have a whole hospital room and care and stuff. You start talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of for procedures that's not, you don't know about, that you don't really know what's covered. You're sick, and it's like, oh my gosh, you just about have to have, a medical power of attorney, right? A medical power of attorney at all times. At all times. Then, if you have a medical power of attorney, you definitely have to think about, well, if you got that, do not resuscitate, or you say you don't come back 100%, right? I don't think it takes very long for you to be like gone, without oxygen for a certain period of time. Okay? So anyway, and then you have to start thinking about, a power of attorney for your financial and your estate and your executor of your will, right? And that was one of the things, that I was stating, was that, hey, I made my dad as proud as I could make my dad, right? And of course, my dad was definitely a chauvinist, right? However, he had to, change his mind about, some of his chauvinistic ways, when, he decided, to take me under his guardianship as a single parent. He still was a chauvinist. Yes, he still was. However, the way that he thought about how women contribute, kind of, changed as a result. I have my protein shake. Amazon must not be real busy, because they went ahead and gave my complete order early. It arrived yesterday. I was like, what is this? And I was thinking, because they said, oh, well, the only thing that they could, give me by yesterday was the dog biscuits. Right? So, but I got my complete order, including the protein drink. So I got my protein drink. I got my collagen, my fiber, and my creatine up in here. All right. But yeah. So now I'm trying to figure out, just how they're going to go about from this point on, right? Because like I said, it's obvious they have a data bank that the medical industry uses. Okay, they do. They have a data bank that the medical industry uses. Now, I was watching Meaty Mama and her video. Things come up on my algorithm for a reason. So she said that she had went to the marketplace to try to get medical coverage. And they told her that, because of her weight, she would have to pay, I think it was like $600 a month, right, for medical coverage, because of her weight and her age, I guess. Because there are people out there that can get medical coverage for $35, $40 a month. But it's not the people that need it, So, needless to say, I was thinking that since I had Social Security on the phone, right, that, they have to, be able to tell me if I can get like Medicare or if I can get disability payments. No, there was none of that. None of that. So I was very disappointed about that. She did not even allow me to ask her. She took complete control of the interview by basically signaling to me that she has questions that she needs to ask me, which was the same questions that was asked in the first interview. Right? But I'm telling her, I'm saying, look, anyway, it was very disappointing. I don't know where it's going from here. I suspect I'm probably just going to get a rejection letter in the mail. Right? This kind of service from our government is deplorable. Okay? That you would put people in positions who are in derelict of their duties. Right? And the audit, you can't afford the audit either. And yet these people, especially when it comes to medical, have the ability to make a decision that can affect this person's whole life, or lack thereof of having a life. Okay, so I'm just really disappointed. And of course, this is all because, instead of being America, right? Instead of being the United States of America, we have America Corporation that took over. And I was watching this this British content creator, and he explained about the Star Spangled Banner anthem that America sings, right? And this is when America was breaking free from being dominated by the Britons, right? About the flag still standing there, and the flag was being held up by Americans, patriots. Okay? It was sad. It was a statement. Because, you know, the bombardment, you know, that the British had done, you know, upon this fort was cruel and immense. And that was to get America to surrender to the Britons. And America wouldn't surrender to the Britons. They would not. You know, the Americans was like, nah, you're going to have to kill us. You're going to have to kill us because we ain't surrendering. Right? So, on that aspect of the situation, you know, America looks great. Okay? America looks great. America looks great that they had the ability to build such great places, such great homes, such great communities, such great schools, such great supermarkets. Okay? America looks great, right? But like I said, you know, not all white people are the same, right? The white people who was trying to get away from the British rule, right, and wanted to tax America, they're still present today, right? The white Aryan Nazis that, you know, had to get away from Germany or face execution, they're here too, right? But they're not going around here bragging about their past, right? They are not. So the less you know about their past and where they're from and from England, you know, the better they like it. Oh, they got the fountain working again. Look at it. Look. But the elephants aren't going. The other day, the elephants was spouting out water. But the elephants, they didn't turn on the elephants. Okay. So anyway, now that was one of the things that, you know, I had been saying even before I had applied for disability again, right? Because like I said, anytime I fill out a work application and they're like, do you have any of these disabilities, right? And cancer's on there. Not, you know, do you have cancer right now? It's, have you had cancer ever? And that's a disability. And I'm like, well, if I've had cancer and that's a disability, how come they didn't automatically qualify me for disability insurance, right? Especially when it's involving my metabolism. Especially when I have to take blood tests and medication, right? And it's ongoing. And it can move to other parts of my body. As far as I know, you know, the cancer could have moved to, I don't know, my stomach or my lungs. I don't know. But we're not going to like manifest that, into existence. We are not. We're just saying that it's a possibility. Right? We're also saying that, a stressful life, can make, body situations and conditions just right for your body to turn on you. Could be a bad relationship, could be a bad workplace, could be, bad living conditions. These less ideal situations can make your body decide that, this is not a good place to be. And honestly, our government knows that. That's why if you find yourself being ushered into like a bad environment, that's the government's way of manipulating, your purpose and your destiny on this planet. Right? Because they're supposed to, help you, because they're put in this leadership position. Right? And even if they put you in a situation that has to be modified or changed, they're supposed to do that too. Because nothing stays the same. My goodness, it's 78 degrees out there. I was wondering why I was feeling a little hot. Okay, so that's my rant. Now, I'm going to take the pitties for a walk. The pitties for a walk. Yeah.